When my son Travis got married, I kept my mouth shut about the $45 million ranch I had just inherited from my late wife. It was the hardest secret I ever had to keep, but thank God I stayed silent, because exactly 1 week later, my new daughter-in-law showed up at my doorstep with a crooked notary and a document that would have stripped me of everything. She thought she was signing away the rights to a worthless shack and a confused old man. She had no idea she was signing her own financial death warrant. But before we get to that moment of absolute cold-blooded justice, you need to see where it all began. It began with a tie, a simple red silk tie, and a wedding where I was treated worse than a stray dog. My name is Harlan Ford. I am 70 years old. I have calluses on my hands that are older than my son, and I have spent my entire life believing that family is the only thing in this world worth dying for. But standing in the glittering lobby of the Emerald City Grand Hotel in Seattle, I began to realize that some family members are the ones holding the knife to your back. I walked into the hotel lobby, feeling the thick plush carpet swallow the soles of my heavy work boots. I was wearing my best suit. It was a navy blue wool suit I bought 20 years ago. It was a little tight now, but Martha, my late wife, always said I looked handsome in it. I adjusted my tie. It was a deep crimson red. Martha gave it to me for our 30th anniversary. It was the only splash of color I had on me, a piece of her coming with me to watch our son start his new life. Just then I saw her, Brittany, my new daughter-in-law. She glided across the marble floor in a white silk robe, surrounded by bridesmaids. She looked beautiful in the way a diamond looks beautiful cold, hard, and terrifyingly expensive. She stopped dead in front of me, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "That tie," she said, her voice sharp like broken glass. "It has to go. It ruins the aesthetic. The theme is champagne, blush, and ivory. That red is aggressive. It screams cheap. Take it off." I felt a hard lump in my throat. This was Martha's. I said quietly, "I don't care who gave it to you," Brittany snapped. "You are already going to stick out like a sore thumb in that worn-out suit. Lose the tie, or go find a seat in the back and stay out of the way." She marched away, her bridesmaids giggling. I stood there alone, anger washed over me. I wanted to leave, but Travis was my son. Martha would have wanted me there, so I slowly untied the red silk and shoved it deep into my pocket, shoving my dignity in there right along with it. I made my way to the ballroom and approached the hostess stand. I expected to be at table 1 or 2. I am the father of the groom, after all. The hostess swiped her screen and sent me to table 40. Table 40 was in the absolute farthest back corner, shoved completely behind a massive pillar, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. It was the vendor table. I sat down on a wobbling chair as waiters rushed past, bumping me repeatedly. Across the vast room, I could see Travis laughing at the head table, completely unbothered. A waiter slammed a bottle of vintage French wine onto my table as a resting station. I knew from Martha's magazines that this bottle cost $2,000. The number echoed in my head. $2,000 was exactly the cost of the specialized medication Martha needed in her final month. I remembered calling Travis, begging for help. He had cried on the phone, telling me his business was bad and he had absolutely nothing to give. I had sold my truck and eaten cheap noodles just to buy half the dose. And now, I was staring at a bottle of wine that cost the exact same amount. Travis wasn't broke, he just didn't want to waste his money on a dying mother. An older woman approached my table, looking for a quiet place to rest. Before I could speak to her, Brittany appeared out of nowhere. "Oh, Mrs. Vanderwall," Brittany chirped falsely. "I see you found our little charity project. This is Harlan. He used to be the gardener for my family's summer estate." No family, no money. Travis and I thought it would be a nice Christian gesture to invite him here for a hot meal. We try to give back to the less fortunate. The air completely left my lungs. Gardener. Charity case. Less fortunate. Mrs. Vanderwall looked at me with deep pity. "How incredibly generous of you." "Brittany." Brittany stared right at me, daring me to ruin her perfect night. I looked across the room at Travis. He saw his wife. He saw his father sitting in the humiliating corner. And he did nothing. He just took a sip of his wine and deliberately looked away. That was the moment the loving father in me died. I forced a painful smile and thanked them for the food. Once they left, I didn't stay for the cake. The humiliation was suffocating. I needed air. I walked toward the restrooms near the entrance. a luxurious space lined with black marble and gold fixtures. I splashed ice-cold water on my face, looking at the tired old man in the mirror. Just then, the heavy oak door swung open. Loud, arrogant laughter echoed off the marble. It was Travis and his best man. Julian instinct kicked in. I didn't want to face him. I stepped quickly back into the large handicap stall and locked the door, holding my breath. "Did you see your old man out there?" Julian laughed, flicking a lighter to vape. "That suit looks like he dug it up from a grave, I know," Travis replied, sounding fiercely annoyed. "He is a complete disaster, but forget about him. We need to talk about the real problem. The sharks are circling Julian. My phone has been blowing up all morning." I pressed my ear firmly against the stall door. My heart hammered against my ribs. "How deep are you?" Julian asked. 200, Travis whispered. In the dead silence, it sounded like a scream. $200,000. The boy who told me he was too busy with angel investors to visit his dying mother owed 200 grand. "Damn, Travis." Julian whistled. "I told you to stay away from the tables. You said the crypto thing was a sure bet." "It was," Travis snapped, "but the market crashed and I tried to make it back at private poker games. It spiraled. They are giving me 2 weeks before they start coming after my physical assets." I felt physically sick. The tech startup was a complete lie. It was gambling, unadulterated greed. "What is the plan?" Julian asked. "If Brittany finds out you are dead broke, this marriage is over." "I have a plan." Travis chuckled darkly. "Why do you think I convinced Brittany to let us go to Montana for the honeymoon?" "The ranch. I had a buddy run a quiet title search. It is 5,000 acres. Even as wasteland, I can easily unload it to a commercial developer for enough to cover the debt and have a cushion left over." "But it is his land," Julian pointed out. Travis laughed, a cruel, dismissive sound that broke my heart. "Look at him. He is 70. He is confused. I will tell him we are there to take care of him. Brittany has all the paperwork ready. We will get him to sign a power of attorney for his medical insurance. Once I have that signature, the land is sold. And what about him?" "State facility," Travis said casually. "He will have a bed and 3 meals a day. He is practically senile anyway. I am doing him a favor." I stood there in the dark stall, my hands clenched so tight my fingernails cut into my palms. My own flesh and blood was planning to illegally sell my land and throw me into a state-run home to rot and die, just to pay off his illegal gambling debts. I wanted to kick the door open and scream. But I am a combat veteran. I learned in Vietnam that you never fire your weapon until you have an absolutely clear shot. If I confronted him now, he would spin it, and Brittany would believe him. Silence was my weapon. "Let's go," Travis said. They walked out and the door clicked shut. I stepped out of the stall. The profound sadness was completely gone from my eyes, replaced by something much colder. I walked straight to the exit, past the valet parking, and walked 3 miles to the Greyhound station. I bought a one-way ticket back to Montana. I sat in the back of the bus as it pulled out of the city. Travis thought I was senile. He thought he could come to my home and steal everything I had left. Let them come. I wrapped the red silk tie around my hand. He wanted to gamble. I would give him the most dangerous gamble of his life. But he didn't know the golden rule. On Silver Creek Ranch, I am the house. And the house always wins. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 5 days after the wedding fiasco in Seattle. The Montana air was crisp, smelling sharply of pine needles and damp earth. I was standing in the front yard of my cabin, the green garden hose feeling cool and heavy in my hand. I was watering the blue hydrangeas. Martha and I had planted them 30 years ago, on the day we moved into this small cabin, after handing the main ranch house over to the trust management. In her final months, I would pick the biggest blooms and put them in a vase by her bedside. Keeping them alive now felt like keeping a small, breathing part of her in this world. The peace was violently shattered by a low, aggressive rumble echoing off the canyon walls. I looked down the long dirt driveway. A massive cloud of dust was billowing up into the sky. A brand new black Range Rover was tearing up the road at a reckless speed, looking like a shiny metallic beetle, entirely out of place in the rugged landscape. I waved my hand, signaling for them to slow down, but the driver didn't lift his foot off the gas. The heavy vehicle drifted around the bend, tires spinning wildly on the loose gravel. The rear tire jumped the wooden border of the flower bed. I heard the sickening crunch of wood snapping, followed by the wet, tearing sound of vegetation being mercilessly ground into the mud. The SUV plowed directly through the center of the hydrangeas, flattening the vibrant blue flowers under 2 tons of luxury steel before screeching to a halt inches from the front porch steps. Silence returned, tense and ringing. The driver's door opened and Travis stepped out, wearing expensive designer sunglasses and a beige cashmere sweater. "Hey, Dad," he called out with a bright plastic smile. Surprise! Brittany emerged from the passenger side wearing pristine white sneakers. The moment her foot touched the dusty ground, she grimaced, looking at the cabin as if it were a rotting roadkill carcass. I dropped the hose. The water pooled around the destroyed flowers, turning the dust into deep mud. "You ran over the flowers," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Those were your mother's." Travis casually glanced down, barely registering the destruction. "Oh, sorry about that," he said, cleaning his sunglasses on his shirt. "The handling on this thing is a beast on gravel. I'll buy you a new plant, Dad. It is just a bush." Just a bush. I wanted to tell him that money couldn't buy a 30-year-old root system, but I swallowed the words. I had to play the part. I watched in silence as he hauled out 6 hard-shell Louis Vuitton suitcases, carrying them up the wooden porch stairs. Brittany brushed past me without a word, leaving a trail of heavy perfume that clashed violently with the pine forest. I followed them inside. This cabin was my sanctuary. The floors creaked and the furniture was mismatched, but it was cozy and lived in. Brittany stood in the absolute center of the living room, hands firmly on her hips, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "God, Travis, what is that smell?" "It smells like wood smoke," I said. "And sage, no," she countered, looking at me with cold, dead eyes. "It smells like mildew, honestly, Harlan. It smells like dead people in here." She walked over to the sofa and picked up the Afghan blanket Martha had crocheted. She held it with 2 fingers, holding it as far away from her body as possible. "Look at this clutter." She gestured wildly to the shelves of porcelain birds and old magazines. "We can't live like this, Travis. It is unsanitary. I am not going to spend my honeymoon living in a museum of junk. Tomorrow, I am calling a professional cleaning crew to gut this place and fumigate." She was talking about legally throwing away the physical memories of my wife. I turned to Travis, silently begging him with my eyes to defend this house. He saw the pain in my eyes, but he just shrugged. "She has a point, Dad," he said. He didn't even sound sorry. "Just let her handle it. It will be better for you." He turned his back on me and shoved his suitcase into the guest room. Brittany smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "Don't worry, Harlan. You won't even recognize this place when I am done with it," she sneered, intentionally bumping my shoulder hard enough to make me stumble as she walked past. They thought I was a feeble old man who would simply roll over and let them strip the meat right off my bones. They didn't know about the trust. They had absolutely no idea. They had just walked into the den of a bear who had nothing left to lose. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But I would fight it quietly until the trap snapped permanently shut. Later that afternoon, I walked back from the general store, carrying 2 heavy paper sacks of groceries. It was a 5-mile walk because my truck was sold to pay for Martha's chemotherapy. I had spent $40 of my own emergency cash, because despite their mountain of luggage, Travis and Brittany hadn't bought a single carton of milk. They ordered expensive pizzas and ate them right in front of me without offering a slice. When I asked Brittany to pick up groceries, she laughed and said her cards were for business expenses only. As I approached the cabin, I noticed the windows were wide open. I walked up the porch steps, kicked the front door open with my boot, and stepped inside. Immediately, I heard Brittany's artificially amplified voice echoing down the hallway. "Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, I am coming to you from this quaint, rustic little project house up in the mountains." The voice was coming from the master bedroom. My bedroom, the room where Martha took her last breath. I set the groceries down and walked down the hall, pushing the door open. The room was unrecognizable. The heavy oak dresser was shoved into a corner. 2 massive, blinding ring lights were set up in the center, and a large green screen covered the beautiful window. Brittany was standing in front of the camera in a tight pink dress. "So many of you have been asking about my skincare routine, while I am out here roughing it in the wilderness," she chirped to her phone. I stepped fully into the room, my eyes frantically scanning the walls. The space above the headboard, where a large framed portrait of Martha and me on our wedding day had hung for 30 years, was completely empty. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt since '69. Brittany jumped, dropping her expensive lipstick. "Jesus, Harlan!" she shrieked. "You scared me to death. Can't you see I am live? Get out of the shot. You look like a hobo. Where is the picture, Brittany?" I took a deliberate step forward. She rolled her eyes. "You mean that creepy black and white thing?" It was completely ruining the lighting balance. "I took it down over there." She waved dismissively toward the closet. I looked. Jammed carelessly into a cheap plastic wastebasket was the wooden frame. The glass was shattered. A long, jagged crack ran right through Martha's smiling face, sitting on top of dirty makeup wipes. The air left my lungs. That photo was the only copy I had of that size. She had thrown it in the trash like garbage. I let out a sound that was half sub, half roar, and lunged toward the trash can to save it from the filth. But Brittany saw a perfect chance to be the victim for her viewers. As I reached past her, she suddenly threw herself backward. I was 3 feet away from her, but she shrieked a blood-curdling scream. "Help!" she screamed, flailing her arms wildly. "He is attacking me!" "Travis!" She hit the floor with a heavy thud, intentionally knocking over a ring light that crashed and sent glass flying. She curled up into a ball, sobbing fake theatrical tears. I froze, totally bewildered. Before I could process the insanity, Travis burst into the room. His face was bright red. He saw his wife on the floor and me standing there holding a broken object. He didn't ask what happened. "Dad, no!" he screamed. He lowered his shoulder and slammed into me. I flew backward, my lower back hitting the sharp edge of the dresser with a sickening crunch. I crumpled to the floor, gasping for air in agonizing pain. Travis stood over me, his fists clenched tight. "What is wrong with you?" he spit. "You crazy old man. You actually hit her?" "No," I wheezed, clutching my side. She threw the picture in the garbage. Travis didn't listen. He scooped Brittany up, and she buried her face in his neck. "He is crazy, Travis," she wailed. "He grabbed the light stand." I was so scared. "Get out." Travis growled at me with pure hatred. "I don't care about a stupid picture. I care about my wife. This is assault. We could have you arrested." He helped Brittany toward the door. She limped heavily, but as she looked back over Travis's shoulder, she met my eyes and smirked. It was a fleeting smile of absolute victory. I lay on the floor for a long time. The son I raised was dead. He was a completely dangerous stranger now. I slowly pulled myself up, crawled to the broken frame, and brushed the tiny glass shards off Martha's face. "I am sorry, Martha," I whispered. "I tried to be nice, but they don't want peace." I walked out of the master bedroom and locked myself in the cramped guest room. I sat on the narrow cot and reached into my left work boot, pulling out a small, folded paper from a hollow compartment. It was the private cell number of Patrick O'Malley, the toughest lawyer in the state. I dialed the number. "Yeah?" Patrick answered. "Patrick," I said, my voice cold as ice. "It's Harlan. Get the paperwork ready. We are going with the nuclear option." The sun had finally gone down, painting the vast Montana sky in deep bruises of purple and black. The temperature inside the cabin was rising. The air in the kitchen, usually smelling faintly of stale coffee and sawdust, was now thick with an aroma I hadn't smelled in years. It was the rich, intoxicating scent of searing meat, fresh garlic, and rosemary. My stomach growled a deep, painful rumble that forcefully reminded me I hadn't eaten a proper meal since I walked back from town with those groceries. I unlocked the door to the guest room and stepped out into the dark hallway. I walked into the kitchen. Brittany was standing there, wearing a pristine apron over her designer dress, casually flipping steaks in my heavy cast-iron skillet. Even from the doorway, I could see the intense, marbling thick, white veins of fat running through deep, ruby-red meat, Wagyu. That was meat that cost more per pound than I used to make in an entire week of grueling fencing work. Travis was sitting at the table, a bottle of vintage red wine open in front of him. He looked up quickly when I entered, then quickly looked down at his glass, swirling the dark liquid nervously. I pulled out my usual chair, the wooden one with the slightly uneven leg, and sat down. I watched as Brittany plated the food. She placed a massive, glistening steak on Travis's plate, adding a heap of roasted asparagus and truffle mashed potatoes. She plated her own, humming a little tune. Finally, She turned to me, she picked up a small, chipped ceramic bowl from the counter and set it down in front of me with a loud clatter. "There you go, Harlan," she said, her voice bright and cheery, as if she hadn't just framed me for physical assault 3 hours ago. I looked down at the bowl. It was pale, watery liquid with a few sad, translucent noodles floating in it. Cheap canned chicken noodle soup, watered down significantly to stretch the volume. It smelled heavily of wet cardboard and sodium. I looked over at their plates. The Wagyu steak was resting, rich juices pooling darkly on the ceramic. "What is this?" I asked, gesturing to the bowl. "Dinner," she replied, gracefully unfolding a linen napkin across her lap. "You are eating Wagyu steak," I said, my voice steady but stone cold. "And I am eating dishwater." Brittany sighed, popping a piece of meat into her mouth and closing her eyes in exaggerated delight. "Oh, Harlan, don't be difficult. I am doing this for you. I read your medical chart. You have high blood pressure, don't you? At your age, red meat is a death sentence. It causes gout. It causes strokes. Travis and I would never forgive ourselves if we fed you something that literally stopped your heart." She pointed her silver fork at me. "This soup is low sodium. It is what old people absolutely need. You should be thanking me for monitoring your diet." I looked at Travis. He was furiously shoveling the expensive meat into his mouth, as if eating it quickly would make his overwhelming guilt disappear. "Travis," I said, "you are going to let me eat this slop while you eat a $50 steak?" He swallowed hard and mumbled, without ever looking at me. "She is right, Dad. The doctor said you need to watch your cholesterol. We are just looking out for you." Looking out for me. The words felt like a physical slap across the face. My hand trembled, not from age, but from the immense effort it took not to flip the heavy wooden table over onto them. I needed to eat. I needed fuel for what was coming. I took a spoonful. It tasted mostly of metal. I swallowed it. As I ate, my eyes casually wandered to the open-top kitchen trash can near the fridge. It was overflowing with packaging from their cooking spree. Right on top of the waxy butcher paper, crumpled into a tight ball, was a long white receipt. The logo at the top was from a high-end gourmet market in Missoula, a place I had never once set foot in. I leaned back in my chair and lightly squinted. My eyesight was the one thing that hadn't failed me yet. I saw the total $412 for one single meal, and directly below that, the payment method, Visa ending in 4598. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth, 4598. That was the number of the emergency credit card I kept locked in the safe. The card Travis had begged me to sign for 2 days ago, claiming the electric company was threatening to cut the power because the autopay didn't go through. I had signed the authorization form because I didn't want the lights to go out. But he hadn't used it for the electric bill. He had used it to buy Wagyu beef and vintage wine. I looked closer at the trash. Sticking out from under the butcher paper was a bright yellow receipt from a designer boutique. The total, $2. Item description: handbag. The watery soup suddenly tasted exactly like bile. They weren't just living off me. They had tricked me into handing over my credit line. Now they were actively bleeding it dry, buying extreme luxury goods while feeding me watered-down soup for my health. I looked at Travis, who was laughing at something Brittany just said, his face flushed with wine and greed. He was stealing my future to recklessly pay for his present. A cold, terrifying calm washed over me. It was the clarity of the battlefield. You don't panic. You assess, you plan, you execute. I scraped the ceramic bowl clean. That was delicious. "Brittany," I said, wiping my mouth slowly. "Thank you for thinking of my heart." Brittany looked smug. "See, Travis? I told you he would appreciate it eventually." "You are welcome, Harlan." I stood up. "I'm tired," I said. "I'm going to bed." I walked back to the cramped guest room, locked the door, and shoved the chair under the handle securely. I sat in the dark and waited until 2. In the morning, when the house was dead silent and the heavy, wine-induced snoring of my son echoed from down the hall, I went to the small window, forced the rusty lock open, and climbed out. My boots hit the soft earth of the flower bed. I stood in the darkness, looking back at the house that was now an active crime scene, and pulled my jacket collar up against the wind. I started walking to the highway junction 5 miles away. I had a very important meeting to prepare for. I walked for an hour in the pitch-black darkness before a trucker gave me a lift. I got out at the Rusty Spoon, a 24-hour diner that sat like a beacon of yellow light in the middle of nowhere. I pushed open the heavy glass door, scanning the vinyl booths. In the back corner sat Patrick O'Malley. To anyone else, Patrick looked like a retired, worn-out mechanic in a faded flannel shirt. But Patrick was the sharpest, most ruthless legal mind in the tri-state area. We had served in Vietnam together. He had dragged me out of a burning rice paddy, and I had covered him when he took a bullet. We had a brotherhood forged in blood and mud. I slid into the booth. He pushed a steaming mug of black coffee across the table. "You look like hell, Harlan," he grunted. "I feel like hell," I replied. I walked out of my own house. "Patrick, I had to climb out a window because my son and his wife are occupying the place like it is enemy territory." Patrick sighed. "I told you this would happen when Martha passed. You should have told Travis about the estate then." "No," I shook my head. "If I had told him about the money, I would never have known if he truly loved me or my bank account. Now I know. He doesn't even know the account exists yet, and he is already trying to sell the land." Patrick pulled up a thick leather briefcase, clicked the brass latches open, and slid a pristine blue folder across the table. "Open it." It was the quarterly statement for the Silver Creek Trust. My eyes stopped at the bottom line, $12,400,000. "That is just the wind energy lease payment that cleared yesterday," Patrick said quietly. "The power company is leasing 2,000 acres of your northern ridge. You are not just rich, Harlan, you are wealthy, and yet you are letting your daughter-in-law feed you watered-down soup." The massive number made me feel violently sick. I had $12 million sitting in a bank, and my son was willing to throw me into a state nursing home to rot for a gambling debt. "He owes sharks, Patrick," I whispered over the diner music. I overheard him in the bathroom at the wedding. "He plans to get me to legally sign the ranch over, sell it to a developer, pay his debt and dump me." Patrick slammed his hand on the table, then cut him off. "Sign the eviction notice right here. I will have the sheriff there in an hour. We throw them out." "No," I said. "I need to know exactly how far he will go." I pulled the crumpled receipts out of my pocket. He tricked me into authorizing my emergency card for electricity. He spent $400 on Wagyu steaks and bought her a $2,000 handbag. Patrick's face turned red with anger. "This is fraud. We can nail them on this alone." "Not yet," I said. "I want the big fish. I want them to put it in writing. They are going to try to make me sign a power of attorney. They are repeatedly calling me senile, setting the stage." "Absolutely not," Patrick warned violently. "If you sign a durable power of attorney in Montana, you are handing them the keys to your life. They can empty your accounts and legally commit you to a facility." "I am going to sign it," I said calmly, "but not as Harlan Ford. Do you remember Article 9 of the trust? The bad boy clause." Patrick nodded slowly. "The clause that explicitly says if any beneficiary attempts to seize control of the estate through coercion, fraud, or declaring the primary trustee incompetent, they are automatically disinherited." "Stripped of everything, exactly," I said. "But to trigger it, you need absolute proof of coercion. I need you to be the witness. I need you to wait until the exact moment the pen touches the paper." Patrick looked at me, seeing the same fire he saw in the jungle 50 years ago. "It is risky, Harlan. Desperate people are incredibly dangerous. I trust you won't let that happen," I said, standing up. "I have to get back before they wake up." Patrick grabbed my arm. "I am sorry about Travis. I know how much you loved that boy." "I loved the boy he was," I choked up. "But that boy is gone. Now I have to deal with the man who took his place." I walked out into the howling wind, starting the long walk back to enemy lines. I felt like the poorest man on earth, but poverty makes you completely invisible. And invisibility was exactly what I needed to spring the trap. The sun was just beginning to bleed over the jagged peaks of the mountains when I slipped quietly back through the window of the guest room. My aging joints ached from the cold night air and the long walk, but my mind was razor sharp. I locked the window, shoved the chair back firmly under the door handle, and lay down on the narrow cot, fully dressed. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, carefully rehearsing my role. Patrick had warned me to pull this off. I couldn't just be quiet. I had to be actively confused. I had to become the very thing they accused me of being. A senile, helpless old man who couldn't be trusted with a toaster, let alone a multi-million-dollar estate. I waited until I heard the heavy footsteps of Travis shuffling toward the bathroom. Then came the hissing sound of the espresso machine in the kitchen, the fancy one they had brought with them, because my old percolator tasted like dirt. It was showtime. I shuffled out of the bedroom. I intentionally stooped my shoulders, curving my spine to lose 2 inches of height. I let my jaw hang slightly slack. I walked into the kitchen, dragging my feet noisily on the floorboards. Travis was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone with a desperate, frantic intensity. Brittany was at the counter, whisking matcha powder into a bowl. She didn't look up when I entered. "Good morning," I mumbled, my voice thin, raspy, and weak. Travis grunted without looking up. "Morning, Dad." I walked over to the cupboard. I opened it and stared blankly inside. Blinking slowly, I reached for a mug, but I intentionally let my hand shake violently. The ceramic mug rattled loudly against the shelf. I grabbed it, then paused. I turned to Brittany. "Morning, Bessie," I said, giving her a wide, vacant smile. "Did you feed the chickens yet?" The whisking stopped instantly. Brittany froze. She turned slowly to look at me. Her eyes were wide, not with concern, but with utter shock. "What did you just call me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Bessie," I repeated, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You are a good girl, Bessie. Best bird dog I ever had." Travis dropped his phone onto the table with a clatter. He stared at me, then at Brittany. A slow, incredulous smile began to spread across his face. "Dad," he said, letting out a short, cruel laugh. "That isn't Bessie. Bessie was the golden retriever we had when I was 10. She died 15 years ago. That is my wife. That is Brittany." I blinked, feigning deep confusion. I looked at Brittany, then back at Travis. I scratched my head. "Brittany?" I muttered. "Oh right, Brittany. Where is Bessie then?" I thought I heard her barking. Brittany didn't get angry this time. Instead, she looked at Travis, and a look passed silently between them. It was a look of pure, unadulterated opportunity. It was the look a starving wolf gives when it realizes the deer has a broken leg. She walked over to Travis and whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "Did you hear that? He thinks I am a dog. He doesn't even know what year it is." I turned back to the counter. I needed to up the stakes. Being slightly confused wasn't enough. I needed to be a liability. I needed to give them a reason to act fast. I reached for the sugar bowl, but I knocked it over on purpose. White granules spilled in a massive wave across the counter and rained onto the floor. I stared at the mess, then looked around helplessly, my eyes darting back and forth. "Oh dear," I whispered in a panicked voice. "The snow is getting in. I need to close the barn door." I walked past the mess, stepping deliberately in the sugar, grinding it into the floor. I went to the back door where a set of keys hung on a hook. These were the keys to the old tractor shed, but I acted like they were the most important thing in the world. "Where are they?" I panicked, patting my pockets frantically. "My keys? I can't find the keys to the truck. I need to go pick up Martha. She's waiting for me at the station." The room went dead silent. "Dad," Travis said, his voice dropping. "Mom is dead. She has been dead for 6 months. You know that." I stopped. I looked at him with wide, watery eyes. "Dead?" I whispered. No, she called me. She said she needed a ride." I sank down onto the floor right there in the middle of the kitchen and buried my face in my trembling hands. I started to rock back and forth. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, denying the reality of my wife's death, using her sacred memory as a prop in a con game. It made me feel sick to my stomach, but I had to sell it. Brittany crouched down, but not to comfort me. She was examining me like a specimen in a lab. "He is totally gone, Travis," she whispered, her voice trembling with intense excitement. "This is it. This is dementia. Rapid onset. He is hallucinating. He is a danger to himself." Travis looked at me, biting his lip nervously. "You think? Maybe he is just tired." Brittany hissed venomously. "He thinks I am a dog and his dead wife is at the train station. If we leave him alone, he will burn the house down. We can't wait anymore, Travis. We can't wait for a doctor's appointment next week. We need to take control now, for his own safety. For his own safety," the magic words. I let out a low moan, still rocking on the sugar-covered floor. "I just want to go home," I mumbled. Travis stood up. He walked over to the window and looked out, actively avoiding my gaze. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, do it. Call the guy." I stayed on the floor, listening carefully. Brittany practically sprinted to the other room to grab her phone. I heard her walking out onto the porch, closing the glass door behind her to muffle her voice. But sound carries well in the mountains, and my hearing was the one thing I hadn't lost. I focused. I could hear her voice, sharp and commanding. "Mr. Henderson," she said. "Yes. It is Brittany. Look, plans have changed. We can't wait until next week. We need you out here tomorrow morning. First thing." There was a pause. She was listening to the person on the other end. "I don't care if it is a rush job," she snapped. "I will pay double the fee. Yes, the paperwork is ready. A durable power of attorney. Full control, assets, medical, real estate. Everything." Another pause. "No, he won't be a problem." She laughed, a cold, dry, terrible sound. "He is completely out of it. He doesn't even know who we are half the time. He will sign whatever we put in front of him, if we tell him. It is a permission slip for a field trip. Just get here, bring your seal, and bring a witness if you can, someone who knows how to keep their mouth shut." She hung up. I heard the door slide open. She walked back into the kitchen. The rubber soles of her sneakers squeaked on the sugar I had spilled. She walked over to Travis and put a hand firmly on his shoulder. "It is done," she said triumphantly. "Henderson is coming at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Once the ink is dry, we can put him in the facility in Missoula by the afternoon. They have a bed open in the memory care unit." Travis looked down at me, still huddled on the floor. Is it a nice place?" he asked weakly. "It is fine," Brittany said dismissively. "It is clean. They will drug him up so he won't be scared. And then, babe, we can finally focus on us. We can sell this place, pay off your debts, and get back to our lives. We are saving him, really." Travis nodded slowly, convincing himself of the lie. "Yeah, we are saving him." I let out a long, shaky breath, letting them think it was a sob of pure confusion. Inside, I was smiling a cold, dark smile. They had taken the bait. They had swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. They thought they were bringing in a notary to legally sign away my freedom. They didn't know they were inviting the executioner to their own funeral. I let them help me up. I let them guide me back to my room like a lost toddler. "Get some rest, Dad," Travis said, patting my arm awkwardly. Big day tomorrow. He had absolutely no idea how big. I went into my room and closed the door. I waited until I heard them go outside to inspect the damage to the Range Rover. Then I pulled out my burner phone. One last time, I sent a single text message to Patrick O'Malley. 0900 hours. Bring the cavalry. I lay back on the cot. The waiting game was officially over. Tomorrow the trap would snap shut, and I would finally find out if justice still existed in this world, or if it was just another thing I had imagined in my old age. The morning sun sliced through the kitchen window like a bright spotlight, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat at the heavy wooden table, my hands resting on my knees, waiting. I had dressed carefully for this performance. I wore a faded flannel shirt buttoned wrong at the collar, and trousers intentionally stained with coffee. I needed to look like a man whose mind was dissolving like sugar in hot water. At 6 a.m., a beat-up sedan pulled up the gravel driveway. It was the kind of car that had seen far too many miles and not nearly enough maintenance. A short man stepped out, carrying a bulky leather briefcase that looked like it had been bought at a cheap pawn shop. He wore a suit a size too small, the fabric shiny at the elbows, and a tie permanently stained with something that looked suspiciously like mustard. Brittany met him eagerly at the door. I heard them whispering in the hallway. The tone was urgent, conspiratorial. Then they walked into the kitchen. "Dad," Brittany said, her voice dripping with fake nursery school teacher sweetness. "Look who is here to see you. This is Mr. Henderson. He is a social worker from the county. He is here to help you get more money for your pension." Isn't that nice? Henderson didn't look like a social worker. He looked like a man who bet heavily on dog races and lost. He smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. He offered me a sweaty, clammy hand. "Good morning, Mr. Ford," he said, his voice oily and incredibly rushed. "I just need to verify a few quick things so we can increase your monthly benefits." I shook his hand weakly, letting my grip remain perfectly limp. "More money?" I mumbled, looking right past him. "That would be good. I need to buy a ticket for Martha. She's waiting at the station." Henderson glanced nervously at Brittany. She gave him a sharp, confident nod as if to see. "I told you he was gone." Henderson sat down, placing his heavy briefcase on the table and clicking the brass latches open. The sound echoed loudly. He pulled out a thick stack of documents, stapled together on official blue legal paper. I knew exactly what they were. "Here we go." Henderson said, sliding the thick stack toward me. He uncapped a heavy black fountain pen. We just need a few signatures here, here, and here. Just standard procedure. I stared at the paper. The text was dense legalese at the top. In bold, unmistakable letters, it didn't say pension application. It said, General Durable Power of Attorney. Brittany was standing right behind me, her hands gripping the wooden back of my chair. Travis was pacing rapidly by the sink, wiping his sweating forehead, looking like he was about to vomit. Go ahead, Dad, Travis said, his voice tight and unnaturally high. Just sign it so Mr. Henderson can get back to work. It is for your own good. I reached for the pen. I made my hand tremble violently. I reached, purposely missed, then grabbed it awkwardly in my fist like a child. I looked down at the paper and purposely squinted. Is this for the train ticket? I asked. Henderson forced a grimace. In a way, yes, it gets you the money for whatever you need. Mr. Ford, just sign on the line next to the isks. I lowered the pen, the tip hovered over the signature line. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I started to make a mark, a shaky, meaningless line. Then I stopped. I pulled the pen back. Brittany let out a small, frustrated breath behind me. I leaned in closer to the document. I focused my eyes, dropping the confused act for a split second to read Clause 4, authority to dispose of real property. I read the words granting the agent full power to sell, convey, lease, mortgage, or otherwise dispose of any real property owned by the principal, including but not limited to the property known as Silver Creek Ranch. I looked up. I looked straight at Travis. He utterly refused to meet my eyes. I tapped the paper firmly with the pen. Why does it say sell? I asked. My voice wasn't raspy this time. It was curious, but perfectly clear. What? Brittany snapped, stepping quickly around the chair to look. Right here, I pointed exactly to the word dispose. It says sell the ranch. Why would the pension people want to sell my ranch? The air in the room froze solid. Henderson looked at Brittany, absolute panic flaring in his eyes. He hadn't expected the old man to read the fine print. Brittany recovered fast. She snatched the paper away, pretending to smooth it out. Oh, Dad, you are reading it wrong. She laughed a brittle laugh. You need your glasses. That doesn't say sell, it says seal. Like a stamp, it is just legal mumbo-jumbo. Your eyes are playing tricks on you again. She pushed the paper back under my nose, intentionally covering the paragraph. Just sign at the X, Harlan, she commanded, completely dropping the sweet act. Stop wasting everyone's time. Travis stepped forward, looking beyond desperate. Dad, please, just sign the damn paper. We are trying to help you. The guys are waiting. Mr. Henderson is waiting. The guys are waiting. He meant the sharks, the violent debt collectors. They were blatantly lying to me. They were actively using my feigned disability against me. This was the absolute coercion Patrick needed. I let out a long, heavy sigh, letting my shoulders slump forward again. I don't read so good anymore, I mumbled, instantly returning to character. I guess you know best, Travis. You always were a smart boy. Travis let out a massive breath. Yeah, Dad, I am doing this for us. Brittany leaned down, her lips brushing against my ear, and whispered words meant only for me. Sign it, Harlan, or so help me God. I will have the orderlies here within the hour. Her voice was a low hiss of pure venom. I know a place in Missoula. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage. They will strap you to a bed. They will sedate you until you don't know your own name. The paper or the padded room. Choose. I gripped the pen tighter. My hand shook violently. Okay, I said, for the train ticket. I pressed the pen to the paper, but I didn't write Harlan Ford. I began to write a sequence that meant absolutely nothing to them, but everything to the law. 1972 Martha, the year Martha and I bought the very first acre of land. The distress code Patrick Ali had set up decades ago. A signature that automatically triggered the fraud protection clauses of the estate and stripped the beneficiary of all rights. I finished with a shaky flourish. There, it is done. Henderson grabbed the paper immediately. He didn't even check the signature. He pulled out his notary seal, slammed it down onto the paper with a heavy thud, and signed his own name. Done. Henderson shoved the papers back into his briefcase. Congratulations, Mrs. Ford. You now have full legal control over the estate. Brittany closed her eyes and smiled a terrifying smile, the smile of someone who had just won the lottery by killing the ticket holder. She reached into the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne she had bought, with my stolen credit card. She popped the cork loudly and poured the bubbling golden liquid. To us, she announced, shoving a glass into Travis's trembling hand. To the future, and to getting rid of the past. She looked directly at me. I was the past. I sat there, my hands folded calmly on the table. You shouldn't drink that, I said quietly. Brittany paused, the glass halfway to her lips. She sneered. Excuse me? I said, you shouldn't drink that, I repeated, my voice steady and completely cold. It is bad luck to toast with stolen money. Brittany laughed, shaking her head. Oh, Harlan, you are still confused. It isn't stolen. It is ours, you signed, remember? It is binding, and there is nothing you can do about it. She tilted her head back to take a sip, and that was when the sound cut sharply through the air. It started as a low wail in the distance, but it grew louder with terrifying speed. The sound of authority, the sound of judgment, the siren. Brittany froze. The crystal glass remained at her lips, but she didn't drink. Her eyes darted wildly to the window. Travis completely dropped his glass. It shattered violently on the floorboards, the expensive champagne pooling rapidly around his shoes like blood. What is that? Travis whispered. That is the police, Henderson said, his face turning the exact color of ash. Why are the police here? Brittany hissed. Calm down, it is probably just a patrol. I have the paperwork. I am the legal guardian. I will handle this. But the siren didn't pass by. It cut off abruptly right in front of the cabin, instantly replaced by the heavy crunch of tires on gravel and the loud slamming of car doors. I stood up. I pushed my wooden chair back. The scraping sound was incredibly loud in the sudden, terrifying silence of the room. I don't think you can handle this, Brittany, I said. I walked past her. I walked past Travis, who was trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. I walked past the terrified notary. I walked straight to the front door and threw it open. There, standing tall on the porch, was Sheriff Miller, his hand resting securely on his belt. And right behind him, carrying a file folder and looking like an angel of vengeance in a trench coat, was Patrick O'Malley. Blue and red lights flashed intensely from the cruiser behind them, washing the cabin in a chaotic, strobing glow. Good morning, gentlemen, I said, stepping aside to politely let them in. I believe we have some guests who have severely overstayed their welcome. Brittany rushed to the door, her face quickly morphing into a mask of fake outrage. Officer, she shouted, thank God you are here. My father-in-law is having an episode. He is confused. We were just trying to calm him down. Patrick O'Malley stepped fully into the kitchen. He looked at the shattered glass on the floor, the puddle of champagne, and the notary. He didn't smile. Mrs. Ford, Patrick said, his voice deep and resonating with the absolute weight of the law. You can save the act. We received a digital alert from the trust monitoring system the moment a signature was attempted under duress. And I believe you have a document in that briefcase that legally belongs to the court. You have no right to be here. Brittany shrieked, pointing at Sheriff Miller. Get out of my house. Sheriff Miller didn't flinch. Nobody called us, ma'am. We were formally invited by the legal owner of the property. The owner? Brittany gasped. He doesn't know what day it is. I have the paperwork right here that proves I am his legal guardian. Give me the file, Henderson. But Henderson was staring at Patrick in pure terror. Patrick held out his hand, and Henderson handed the briefcase over instantly. Patrick pulled out the blue folder and turned the document around for Brittany to see. Is this the paperwork you are referring to, Mrs. Ford? Patrick asked. Yes, he signed it. She snapped. Patrick shook his head. I see a signature here, but it doesn't say Harlan Ford. It says 1972 Martha. Brittany froze. Her face went totally slack. What? No, he was writing a distress code, Patrick interrupted, his voice hard as steel. In Montana, a signature proven to be a prearranged distress signal is immediate proof of severe coercion. It renders the document void and serves as direct evidence of a crime. He slammed the folder shut. What you have done here today, attempting to forcefully institutionalize a senior citizen to steal his assets, is a third-degree felony. Exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and since you involved a notary, we are adding conspiracy to defraud to the list. The blood drained from Brittany's face. She staggered back. Travis, do something, she hissed. Tell them your father is crazy. Travis didn't speak. He stared at the floor, silent tears streaming down his face. I rolled my shoulders back, instantly shedding the hunch of the old man I had pretended to be. I buttoned my flannel shirt with steady fingers and wiped the spilled champagne from the floor. I turned to face them. My eyes were clear. My jaw was set. I heard you in the bathroom at the wedding. Travis, I said, my deep voice echoing in the kitchen. I heard you planning to sell the ranch to pay your gambling debts to those sharks. When I dropped that sugar yesterday, I was begging you to help me. I wanted you to step in and say, "Stop, that is my father." But you handed me the pen. You told me to sign my life away. Travis fell heavily to his knees. "Dad, please, I am sorry. She made me." "She didn't make you do anything," I said coldly. "You chose money over blood, and now you have to live with that." Patrick cleared his throat loudly. "Before the sheriff officially escorts you off the premises, there is one final piece of business. Since you were so eager to discuss the assets, I think it is only fair that you understand exactly what they are." Patrick looked at Brittany. "You thought you were fighting for a dilapidated cabin. This is the recent appraisal of the Silver Creek Trust. 5,000 acres of prime wilderness, water rights, timber rights, and mineral rights. The total net worth is exactly $45 million. $45 million. Travis whimpered like a dog. Brittany stopped breathing entirely. "But that is not all," Patrick continued ruthlessly. "There is a conditional beneficiary clause, Clause 9, Section B. If any beneficiary attempts to seize control through fraud, coercion, or falsely declaring the trustee incompetent, they are immediately and irrevocably removed from the trust." Patrick took off his glasses. "The moment you forced Harlan to sign that fraudulent paper, you triggered this clause. It is self-executing, which means as of 10 minutes ago, neither of you is entitled to a single penny. Never. The $45 million is completely gone." Brittany made a sound like a strangling cat. Her hands flew to her chest. She reached out blindly, missed the counter entirely, and collapsed. She hit the floor with a heavy thud, gasping for air, broken by the crushing weight of her own unparalleled greed. Travis didn't run to help his wife. He threw himself across the room, sliding on his knees until he was directly at my feet. He frantically buried his face in my work boots. "Dad, please!" "You can't do this. I didn't know," he wailed, pointing a shaking finger at Brittany. "She made me do it. I was scared. Dad, I love you. Please don't cut me out." I felt absolutely nothing. I stood there solid as an oak tree. "You didn't know lying was wrong?" I asked, my voice cutting through his wails. "You are not crying because you are sorry. You are crying because you are poor. If that folder said the ranch was worth nothing, you would still be standing there, happily letting them haul me away to the asylum." Travis froze, the brutal truth hitting him. "I loved you, son," I said, "but you loved money far more than you loved me, and now you have neither." I looked at Sheriff Miller. "Sheriff, you have exactly 10 minutes to remove these strangers from my property. Pack your bags and get out. Whatever is left in 11 minutes gets burned." Travis screamed like a child. Sheriff Miller hauled him up. Brittany realized the game was truly over. She grabbed Travis. "Move, get the suitcases now." They scrambled. The arrogant power couple were now running around like cockroaches. Travis threw clothes haphazardly into bags. Brittany rushed into the master bedroom. I followed her quietly. She was frantically fumbling with Martha's wooden jewelry box. She aggressively shoved the pearl necklace into her pocket and reached greedily for the wedding ring. "Put it back," a booming voice echoed from behind me. It was Sheriff Miller. Brittany froze. I was just keeping it safe. "Empty your pockets," Miller ordered. With shaking hands, she pulled out the pearl necklace, a silver brooch, and earrings, dropping them onto the dresser. "Get out," I said with thick disgust. They dragged their heavy luggage out the front door and down the porch steps. But when they rounded the corner of the cabin, they stopped dead. Brittany let out a scream. "Where is my car?" The driveway was completely empty. Patrick called out from the porch. "That wasn't your car. It legally belongs to the leasing division of Seattle Premier Bank. Since you were 3 months behind on payments, their repossession team picked it up quietly while you were busy trying to steal the jewelry." Brittany stared at the empty spot, then at the incredibly long, winding dirt road. 5 miles of dust and heat. Travis sank to his knees in the dirt. "You can't leave us here!" Brittany screamed. "How are we supposed to get to the city?" "I am wearing heels. Walking is good for the heart," I called out. "Start walking. It is a very long way to Seattle." Brittany kicked Travis. "Get up, you idiot!" Travis picked up his bags and started walking without a word. Brittany let out a shriek of pure rage and ran after him, her expensive heels sinking deeply into the soft dirt. I watched them go until they were just two tiny specks blown away by the mountain wind. 6 months have passed. I am sitting on my front porch, holding a steaming mug of coffee, watching young kids running through the field where the hydrangeas are blooming brilliantly once again. I didn't sell the ranch. Silver Creek is now the Martha Ford Sanctuary. We take in veterans who have nowhere else to go and foster kids who have aged out of the system, giving them a safe place to learn a trade and feel what it means to be part of a family. Patrick Ali comes by every Sunday for dinner. He tells me Travis and Brittany are no longer together. Travis is working as a line dishwasher in a diner, living in a tiny studio apartment. Brittany is awaiting trial for real estate fraud, looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. I don't wish them harm. They are ghosts to me now. I took a sip of my coffee and looked at Jim, a veteran who lost his leg, whittling a piece of cedar with a young boy. "Thanks for the coffee, Harlan," Jim said, smiling warmly. "You are welcome, Jim. This is my wealth now. It isn't the $45 million. My true wealth is in the deep respect I see in Jim's eyes and the loud laughter of those kids. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. Sometimes you have to cut off a toxic limb to save the body. And in doing so, I found a much bigger, better family than I ever could have imagined.